3 years ago, I spent all the money I'd saved to move back to Sweden on a wooden boat. I walked away from a life many would dream of to follow my own dreams at sea. To explore one of the wildest and most magnificent coastlines north of the equator. But my dream was cut short. The boat was in a lot worse condition than I'd first thought. And on this channel you'll be able to follow the rebuild of this classical yacht and my attempt of finding my way back to a life closer to Mother Nature and more in harmony with my soul. If only I'd known when I bought this boat that my dreams would be cut short, that my life of freedom would end up with me living in a boatyard in the industrial outskirts of the very city I was trying to escape, would I still have made the decision to leave everything behind? I had been standing at a fork in the road for some time. To continue the life I'd been living, shackled in front of a computer, high up in a tower of glass, or to tear it all down and follow my heart, to find something more meaningful. I had what I thought I wanted, a successful career, a nice apartment and a convenient life, but something was weighing heavy on me. I'd gotten into my job for my love of art, but now I was animating advertisements to sell products no one needed. It felt meaningless, but little did I know that I'd soon be living a life far from anything I was used to. I found her in the autumn of 2022. She was sitting on a buoy in a protected bay on the Canadian west coast. She was built in 1949 by naval architect Ed Monk. Wood, iron and bronze, custom built to cruise the waters of the Pacific Northwest. On paper she made no sense. Old, made out of wood, and probably hiding an ocean of trouble. But I don't think anyone buys a wooden boat because it makes sense. I saw a way out of a life I didn't want to live, and I was ready to deal with the consequences. So with the money that I put aside to start my life over back in my home country of Sweden, I instead bought her. I spent the night on board with the previous owner. He showed me how she worked, while simultaneously vetting me to make sure that I was able to carry her legacy forward. In the morning we brought her over to the Fraser River on the mainland, and then from there I had some help getting her up to Vancouver. That summer I'd gotten some practice behind the helm of a tugboat, so I wasn't completely green, but this was still very much new territory to me. I spent a few weeks selling most of my belongings, and what was left I carried down to the boat in IKEA bags. At this point I wasn't 100% sure where I was going or what I was going to do. But winter was just around the corner, so I needed to get ready. I installed a set of solar panels on the roof, stocked up on food and fuel, and started to practice taking the boat further and further. Our first real trip was to a bay a couple of hours from Vancouver. So we're here at Bedwell Bay. The idea is to go ashore and start cleaning up the beach. This is actually kind of how this whole story began. When I got Atya in the beginning of 2022, I had realized pretty fast that he's a very smart little boy. And to keep him stimulated, I started taking him to the beach and training him how to pick up garbage. And it was through this that I discovered the idea of living on a boat and really how I ended up on this whole journey. The amount of styrofoam left behind here. Everywhere. We spent the afternoon cleaning up the beach, and I loaded all the garbage up on the roof of the boat. We probably spent about a week here, enjoying the last bit of warm autumn weather, blissfully unaware of what the winter would bring. Okay, let's try our first self-caught prawn. So good, do you like it? After some time to recharge our batteries in nature, it was time to return back to Vancouver and do our final preparation for what was going to become one of the hardest winters of my life. Back in Vancouver, while I was finishing my preparations, the first taste of winter rolled in. One night a storm hit, the worst I've seen so far, and in the pitch black the wind climbed to over 90 kilometers an hour and the boat was getting hammered. Things could have gone bad, and that night multiple boats washed up on the rocks along the city. Look at this. Holy sh**, that is a lot of boat. I'd been looking for some safe anchorages where I could seek refuge for the winter, and I'd identified a couple of south-facing bays where I would hopefully be protected from any northerly winds coming down from the Rocky Mountains. One bay in particular. And one day in the end of November, it was time to leave. We're just getting ready here to head out of Vancouver, and our first stop would be Gambier Island, and then from there we'll figure it out. How long we're gone, and we'll see where we go. But I think that's kind of the point of an adventure. Yeah, ready. So together we took off into the unknown. So we left the safety of Falls Creek behind, cruising by the skyscrapers and across English Bay, with our bearings set for the misty mountains in the distance. After half a day's trip, we arrived at the bay where we dropped anchor. A beautiful place where steep mountains tumbled into the sea. Now we were on our own. No nearby fuel docks, grocery stores, or access to power. Do you know where the grocery store is? I don't know. Do you know? Locked in by the weather for days at a time, here I had to rely on my preparations and my skills. I was loving it, exploring the island, foraging oysters on the beach, and enjoying the freedom of not being locked in front of a screen anymore. I mean, check this out. Pretty neat. But my sense of freedom and relaxation was short-lived, because soon the cold weather came, and with it came the snow and the winds. I was rationing fuel for the stove at this time, so I slept with my clothes on, in a sleeping bag, and with multiple blankets on top just to stay warm. The days were nice, but we were starting to have some really snowy and stormy nights, leading to long nights awake at the helm. So So I just decided to dock the boat because we're having some pretty nasty weather, high winds and a lot of snow, and I didn't want to risk any dragging or anything tonight because the visibility is so low. So now we can sleep well tonight. After this I decided it was time to go and try one of the other bays. Maybe they would be more protected from the southern outflow that was flowing down the valley. So I picked another bay and we waited for a clear, calm day and we headed out again. It didn't take me long to meet one of the residential islanders in this new bay. He quickly invited me over and offered me to stay at his dock, and in return I helped him for a few days on his property. I was able to do my laundry and I could take a long warm shower for the first time in a while. This period gave me some time to rest from the storms and the cold, and I got advised to seek out a nearby bay on another island that was supposedly completely protected from the southern outflow. So once again we headed out. It was only about a 2-hour trip over to the west side of the island. The weather was constantly shifting from heavy rain to heavy snowfall. This was one of the snowiest years BC had seen for a long time. While Atya was absolutely loving it, being built for the snow, it was showing me that the boat wasn't 100% waterproof. Water was making its way through different points in the roof and on the deck. I used this time to get a lot of docking practice. I would go out and come back in over and over again, different angles, port side and starboard, figuring out the prop walk and how to best bring the stern into the dock. Across from the island was a small town, equipped with a public dock, a fuel pump and grocery stores. It was only a short trip over, about 20 minutes, and in the days before Christmas it was time to head over and get some food. If I knew what was going to happen during this trip, I would have never left the dock. I was joined by another liveaboard who had arrived at the dock a few days before. The water was a little bit choppy, but nothing that seemed too severe, so we decided to head over. I was still a little bit uncomfortable with docking, but at least I'd done it quite a few times by now. But little did I know how bad it was going to go. Just as I was coming into the dock and getting ready to throw the lines, the winds rolled down the mountains at high speeds. Suddenly the wind grabbed the bimini on the stern and started to push the boat around. It happened so fast I barely had time to react, and suddenly the boat was shimmed between two docks and drifting sideways towards the piling. There was barely anything I could do. If I went backwards I would hit the dock, if I went forwards I would hit the other dock and I would swipe the stern. We were drifting closer and closer to the piling. The guy who joined me aboard ran out and jumped off the bow onto the dock with a line in his hand. And just as he started pulling us around, the boat hit the piling. With a lot of effort he managed to pull the bow around so I could steer away from the piling and into the dock. I got out, tied up, and I was shaken. One of the rub rails had taken most of the impact and cracked, and there was a gash in the planking up in the bow. Things could have gone much, much worse. Christmas had turned from a time of celebration to a time of doubt and regret. The boat was now leaking, not enough that the pumps couldn't handle it, but enough to make me seriously concerned. I couldn't identify where the leak was coming from, and after a few days it stopped. I suspected the planking had moved a bit in the impact and that things had settled back in place again, but it made me realize that maybe the boat wasn't in such a good shape as I'd first thought when I bought it. I started to question the idea of this adventure. Was it worth the risk? To have everything I owned on the line, my own life and the life of my dog? I was considering selling the boat and moving back home, giving up on my dreams. and going back to the prison that I'd left. But there was something inside me that was refusing to let me quit. So instead I decided to see if I could get some mortgage to get access to reliable power so I could start working again, to save up money to do a proper haul out, inspect the boat and deal with any repairs. It's not easy living on a boat. It's the way I like to learn. I like to do things the hard way. I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations and see if I can get out of them, because I really think that that's how you grow the most. I've always been scared of boats and deep water, so I figured this would be the scariest thing I could do. It's teaching me a lot about myself, about a lot of other things too. Strive to be uncomfortable. I think that's my best advice. It was time to say goodbye to the island and head into safety. I had managed to secure a spot up until spring at the government wharf. All I had to do was squeeze my way in there. I've got some moorage here in Gibsons. That gives me a chance to try to get some work, start saving for the haul out. I'll have access to electricity and water, which is gonna be, it's gonna be so nice. So in the middle of January, we said our goodbyes and headed over to what was going to become our home for the next few months. We're gonna enjoy some second breakfast. You know, I think Merry and Pippin had it right. They were onto something, those hobbits. So the adventure was over for this time, or at least the way I had envisioned it. The plan was to stay at the dock through the winter season and early spring. Now that I had access to electricity, I could run a small space heater and run my computer so I could actually get some work in. It was still cold on board, and as the season went by, more and more leaks in the roof showed up. But at least I had access to a warm shower every day. We spent a lot of time walking the beaches and dreaming of being back out there again. But once spring was coming back around, we were gonna leave again. For now, I was just going to hunker down and try to make as much money as I could. Spring eventually came around and it was time to plan our trip back towards Vancouver. I still didn't have enough money to haul out. The plan was to do that later in the autumn, but it was getting more and more obvious that the boat wasn't in great shape. For the summer I was going to stay on anchor to save money and run a generator so I could keep working. And in May it was time to head out. Now we were back where this whole story began, but this time with a different purpose. I kept working throughout the summer, and during my downtime I stripped the varnish and refinished the exterior. Later on we went back to Bedwell Bay. During this trip the boat started taking on a bit more water again, and I ended up attempting an old technique where you dive on the boat with a bag of sawdust. If there's anywhere the water is coming in, the sawdust will get sucked into that hole and then it will get stuck in there and slowly expand. And that will be a bit of a temporary fix until I can haul out the boat and have her fixed up. But I had no success. But just as I was doing that, a man came by. Oh, I'm gonna go down now with the sawdust. He owned one of the sister boats of mine and had a tip of a good shipwright up the Fraser River at a place called Shelter Island. This was the advice I'd been looking for. I've set a timer, and while I'm waiting to see if the bilge comes on again, we're having a bit of crab for lunch. Multiple people had warned me about this place, that it was called the Boatyard of Broken Dreams. It's a place where people were known to get stuck in ever-escalating projects. But I didn't listen. I'd only planned for it to be 2 weeks, quickly haul out, and then back in the water again to continue this adventure. Keeping an eye on me. I had no clue what was going to happen. I got a snow scraper for car windows, and it works amazing for look at this. Could be a potential area worth coming in. As the summer was coming to an end and autumn was bringing her storms, it was time to start to prepare the trip up the river. This was going to be the longest and most complicated trip I'd done this far. We were taking the north arm of the Fraser River, a narrow arm with shallow and muddy shorelines, heavily trafficked by barges towing timber up and down the river. There was also multiple swing bridges that I had to keep an eye on to be able to get through. And just around the 1-year anniversary of this adventure, we took off again. Cruising by the container ships anchored in English Bay, around the corner at UBC and down towards the Fraser. Once we reached the mouth of the river, we took course due east and started making our way up. We were riding the tide up the river, which gave us a couple of extra knots, helping me make headway. I was really hoping to arrive before dark. There were a couple of things that made me a little bit nervous during the trip. I hadn't expected the log barges to be so long and to be moving so fast. And there were a couple of times where I passed these barges where I felt a little bit too uncomfortably close to the shoreline. But everything went surprisingly well. We made our way up the north arm and through the bridges, and then finally into the main arm of the Fraser. Here we took a bearing southwest and headed down the river again towards Shelter Island. I took a final turn in between 2 islands, and there was the marina, with about an hour of daylight left to spare. And now came the final and most complicated moment of this journey. I needed to dock the boat against the flow of the river. I took a couple of passes past the dock to get a feel for it, and then finally I committed. The river was pushing us away, but I managed to get close enough to throw a rope to a man on the dock. We were finally here. In the morning we were getting lifted, and then I could do my 2 weeks of work and be on my merry way. But destiny had something very, very different in store for me. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I really hope you liked it. Now, before I let you go and watch what's coming up next, I'd like to quickly tell you about something that is very important to me, which is my Patreon. Over the next little while, I'll be releasing 4 bonus episodes that are exclusive to Patreon. And they are basically chapters from this story that you just watched. You'll be getting about 40 to 80 minutes of extra content on there. Thank you. You will also be able to get access to exclusive merch on Patreon. So that will be handwritten postcards, pins, and handmade key rings, depending on the tier you choose. Now I'm gonna leave you to it and let you get back to watching the teaser of what's coming up next.